I'm Dr. Sheldon L. Akins from the Leading Equity Podcast and a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 138 of the House of EdTech podcast, I am bringing back my wife, Kate Nesi, and we're talking about balance in education technology in the library. I've also got my EdTech thought where we're going to talk about recycling, and for the EdTech recommendation, I have a 3-for-1 back-to-school special. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nesi. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. Well, hello again. Thank you for making House of EdTech part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. It is hot here in New Jersey, and this episode is going to be a good one. I'm very excited to share a conversation that I had with my wife, Kate Nesi, who is a librarian here in New Jersey, and we had a really good conversation, and this is the 5th time that she'll be on the podcast. I want to say thank you to everybody who has supported Miles and the Vacuum podcast since I released episode 137. Thank you so much for those of you who have connected with him on Twitter and emailed him and sent him feedback. And he actually has an opportunity to speak coming up at some point that somebody reached out via SpeakPipe to see if he and I would Google Hangout with a school and a district to talk to teachers, and he would be the main attraction to talk about being a kid and producing content. So we are both very excited about that. And I mean, summer is winding down here, so I'm kind of gearing up for school. I recently met with somebody who I've worked with the last 2 years as my in-class support teacher, and we did some planning. Now, we took a risk because I haven't yet been given a schedule yet here in the middle of August, so 1, I don't know what I'm teaching, and 2, we don't know if we're working together. But we took some time to plan, so we've got some ideas on paper for September and October of the coming school year. So that's kind of where I'm at, so I don't want to take up any additional time, so let's get right into the EdTech thought, the recommendation, and then I will share my conversation that I had with my wife, and we'll finish things up with the House of EdTech VIP. For this episode's EdTech Thought, I'm calling it Everything Old is New Again, or is it? So for me, the new school year is quickly approaching. For you, it might be here, or it's also quickly approaching. You know, we're getting ready to enter another year doing what we love. If you're not familiar with my story, I've wanted to be a teacher since I'm 16, 17 years old, and I'm getting ready to enter my 12th year of excellence, and I couldn't be more excited. And the last 2 years teaching world history at the high school level has posed great fun. It's also presented different challenges for, being a classroom teacher, being a high school teacher, and, trying to keep up with things. But what many of us do is when the new school year starts, we look back at the old lesson plans, or maybe you're, what I learned years ago, maybe you're a binder teacher, or a binder teacher, somebody who they can just go to their binder and boom, there are their lesson plans and they've got it all laid out. And it's just another year and we're going to go through those lessons again. But as I mentioned at the top of this episode, I want to talk about recycling. And not just reusing things, but recycling them, make them into something new. And what I'm talking about is our lessons and our planning. You might have that great project, and if it's a great project and students love it from year to year, then don't change the project completely or change the technology that you use, but find new ways to do some of the things you do in your classroom. For example, last year, I didn't do Genius Hour. I got to know my students throughout the course of the year, and the collective, the 6 classes I teach, I didn't do my job to prepare them to do something like that. So I tweaked what I did at the end of the year, and they still had the opportunity to do Genius Hour-like things, but it wasn't a full-blown Genius Hour 20% time or anything like that. This year, and then I said earlier that I met with my in-class support teacher, who, again, I hope to work with again this year. And while we were talking, I said, I would like to consider Genius Hour again, and we'll probably know by maybe November or December if it's something that we are working towards. And this year we kind of tweaked, the content is the content. My curriculum says what I have to teach in world history content-wise. But again, if you know me, for me, it's not about the history. Years from now, the students I teach are not going to be remembering dates and names and, a lot of the nitty-gritty of world history. What I hope to have my students come away with are skills and abilities and be able to do things. The verbs of my classroom are create, communicate, collaborate, and be able to critically think. So I'm designing things around my content that will encourage my students and reinforce these skills, these ideas that they can do new things. And, history and what happened yesterday, so to speak, is the vehicle that we're going to be using to do that. But I'm not simply digging back into the last 2 years worth of lesson plans to just recycle what I'm doing and just reusing these plans. I'm, making something new out of them. The content's going to stay the same. The Islamic empires, they haven't changed. Well, they're different now, but when we look at the historical aspects of most of these topics, the history hasn't changed or is not going to change. But the skills and what we do with the students, that's going to change. It keeps me fresh. It keeps my in-class support teacher fresh. And, it's something that, we're not afraid to do. So regardless of whatever subject you teach or your role, I encourage you to consider not just digging back in and pulling it out and doing what you've always done over and over and over again. Okay? I want you to look at those old lessons or the things you did last year or in the last couple of years and think about new ways that you can do some of these things. I'm going to try it, and I hope you try it too. And that's my EdTech thought. And now it's time for my 3-for-1 back-to-school special blowout House of EdTech recommendation. So I have 3 recommendations for the very low price of nothing. So all 3 of these recommendations come from basically the same company. Okay? And the main website is freepickcompany.com. And that's FREEPIKCOMPANY.com. Free Pick Company. Free Pick Company, basically, I'm going to read from their website. They love helping you bring ideas to life. They want you to grow every day, and their goal is to offer the best high-quality content in terms of illustrations, photos, icons, mock-ups, and presentation templates. So 3 resources from Free Pick Company that I want you to check out and consider adding to what you do in your classroom or with and for your students, or even just to give your students some new resources that are going to help them do things visually. One is flaticon.com, and that's FLATICON.com. And this website offers free vector icon sets that you can download and use in Google and any of your graphic editing programs, but you can get free vector icons. Now, if you're not familiar with what a vector icon is or vector graphics, vector just means that when you make it larger or smaller, because it's vector, it's drawn using mathematical curves. And as you make it larger or smaller, because it's based on math, it doesn't become distorted or pixelated. So you can blow something up infinitely big, and you can also make it infinitely small. And because it's based on math, you don't lose quality. It's always going to be clear and crisp and will look nice when you print it or present it visually on a slide or a website or anything like that. The other website is freepik.com, and that's FREEPIK.com. And that's access to free high-quality images that, again, you can download and use in reports or on slideshows or presentations, or even incorporate into making posters or add to websites. And the other one, which is the first thing that I found, is called Slides Go. And that's at slidesgo.com. And Slides Go offers you free Google Slides and PowerPoint templates to enhance your presentations. Now, I've already looked through, and they have some great categories on slidesgo.com, and they have education templates, business templates, marketing templates, medical, and what they call general. And really, once you tweak it, you can use any of these templates to tell any type of story and do any type of presentation. But there's built-in graphics, and the fonts are all in there because they're pulling from the Google font library. So it is pretty cool. So if you want to get access to all three of these, go to freepikcompany.com. And there will be a link to that in the show notes out at chrisnesi.com/138. All right. And for the featured content of this episode, again, from the title, I'm about to play a conversation I had with my wife, Kate Nesi, who is, again, a librarian in a high school right here in New Jersey. And we had a great conversation about balancing ed tech in the library, and a couple of funny things because, well, good things happen when a husband and wife get together and podcast. So here's my conversation with my wife. And joining me now, back again, a fan favorite, my wife, Kate Nesi.
Hello, everybody.
For those not familiar, she's a high school library media specialist.
Librarian.
A librarian. I always mess that up. She has previously been on the podcast 4 times. She first appeared in episode 14. Then she was also on episode 52, 92, and most recently, episode 113.
Wow, I didn't believe I was on that many times.
4 times. You are a very popular guest.
Am I like in that SNL club where it's like 7 times host or something?
Yes, it's time for the...
I'm getting close.
You're in the 4-timers club.
There you go.
Company you. It'll take a while for people to catch up to me, though.
Well, you're the...
I've been on every episode.
Yes. You are the show.
Yes. Now, since the last time you were on, I'm pretty sure... I don't know. Did you have your podcast the last time you were on?
I think so, because I think that's when we promoted it and talked about it. That was almost 2 years ago.
That's true. But that was really in the very beginning of your show.
Oh, yeah. I think I only put 1 episode out, or maybe I hadn't even released it yet.
Now, I know I've talked about it a few times since then, but your podcast is the Lifelong Learning Podcast.
Yes. I have not put out an episode in a little under a year, but I do have plans for more episodes coming soon. I just have to find the time to sit down and record.
Now, based on last episode, Miles has put out more episodes than you recently.
Well, yeah, because he started his podcast just recently.
He's gotten a lot of nice feedback from people who listen to this show. So thank you to those of you who have sent him feedback. You've interacted with his Twitter account at Vacuum Podcast on Twitter. It's been really exciting to see him light up when I'm like, hey, you got an email, you got a tweet. And
yeah, he's getting more followers on Twitter, and he's getting email feedback, and he's excited about his episodes. He writes them, produces them, records them all by himself. You help edit and kind of guide him, but he comes up with the topics and the notes and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really good. It's a good creative project for him to explore his passion just as you explore yours via podcasting. He
actually, and I don't know if I told you this, but I told him because I played it for him. I got a speak pipe from somebody who listens to this show, who listened to the last episode, who wants him, and me, I guess, to help him, to speak to teachers, I think in California, like via Google Hangout, to get an actual child's perspective on creating content and doing a little outside the box creativity and podcasting and creating some content.
I think that's awesome. I think he will run with it. Just like you did with this podcast. I told you I didn't want to hear about ed tech anymore and said, why don't you start a podcast and talk to people who want to listen? And same thing with him. He talks about vacuums 24/7. So he'll be able to share his passions, and eventually he'll connect with other people who have the same passions or interests, or people who are just looking for a review of a vacuum that they might be interested to buy.
And people love, I mean, you mentioned how he will run with it probably the same way I run with this one. And, you know, I love when people ask me, so how did this podcast start? And I always tell the story. And if you're a longtime listener, you know it's Kate's fault that we sit here right now, 138 episodes in.
Yeah, you've been doing this for over 5 years.
It'll be 6 years come January 2020.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I remember you started in a very small room with a Yeti microphone. You've come quite a long way for much better quality and audio and topics and guests.
The first studio is Colton's bedroom, and he just turned 4.
Well, that was your first studio, but you started at...
Well, yeah, in your mother's
at my mom's
sewing
house.
room.
Yeah, in a bright pink room with a little table, one microphone, and a little laptop. And here you are, you have a fancy desk and microphone and doing all sorts of fun things.
Yeah. And you know, as always, I thank you for pushing me to do this.
You pushed me to do mine. It lasted a while. I did put an episode out in this calendar year in February, so... And I do have a lot of episodes. I've written down topics and notes and things I want to talk about. I just get very nervous by myself to talk to a microphone. I get nervous to do interviews too. So I like talking with you, but you don't want to be on my show.
I do want to be on your show.
Well, not all the time.
Well, here's a bit of a teaser. Hopefully one of Kate's next episodes, if not the next one before, you know, school starts as we're recording this conversation. You've been doing CrossFit for...
almost 4 months now.
Almost 4 months, and I've been doing CrossFit for almost 4 weeks.
Yes.
But I think
I would say about 2 weeks. Don't give yourself too much. You're going into your 3rd week.
True. One of the last episodes of your show that we did, we talked about how you were going to challenge me to do things this year in probably 2018 and 2019.
Yes.
Again, something you pushed me to do. I've taken to it, but you'll have to tune in to a future episode of the Lifelong Learning Podcast to hear me talk about CrossFit with Kate.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Now, as much as you've pushed me to have my own ed tech conversations, you know, education technology is a big piece of any school, or at least it should be. And well, that's my perspective. Ed tech is important, but you've been a librarian for longer than I've been in the classroom. You started out in the public library system, you know, locally for people who aren't familiar.
Been a librarian for 14 years.
14 years, entering your 15th year of excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as much as you pushed me to do this podcast and you don't want to hear about it from me, you are interested in technology, and your libraries have always been an effective place in the schools that you've worked in.
I enjoy technology, but I do think there's a good balance between technology and what the focus of a library should be, or the program, or the space, or the underlying skills that you're focusing on. It's not always about the device or internet or things like that.
Right. And I talk about balance based on the fact that, you know, we know of libraries in the world where there's no books. And we know of libraries that are full of books and a lot of dust. And
well, I don't know if there are a lot of dust. There are, you know, some archival libraries, but they're used for certain purposes.
I'd say dust in terms of they're not being used, you know, by students and things like that. But your libraries, and there are other librarians like you, but I get to talk to you, where there is this blending of I'm the library of the future, and I'm also a library that's accessible and has lots of opportunities for students, not just to have books, but not just be about, you know, 3D printing. So can you talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
Well, I think there's some core principles of a library and a library space that kind of cross the generations. That's why libraries have existed. I remember I was interviewed once for a job, and they said, why should I hire a librarian when I could buy a couple hundred computers for the same price? And I said, I don't see libraries going anywhere. They're not going to disappear based on technology, because if you have a good librarian in the space who is working across curricular with staff, who gets along with everybody, who's welcoming, who makes the space inviting, aside from books and technology, you are going to have a library that's thriving and growing. and that's what you want. You don't necessarily want a room with technology, which a lot of libraries and schools have gone to. Either they've cut libraries from the budget, or librarians have been hyper-focused on makerspaces and technology as the only way to go for the future. And I think there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. I always think of the idea of being a linchpin librarian, where you don't want to be the cog in the wheel, but you want to be the one piece that brings it all together. So what I focus on not only is, yes, having a great collection, updating books, updating all of that to support projects, personal interests, passions, things that people come to me and bring to me. But a big part of my library, and we have technology, 3D printer, all that kind of cool, fun gadgets and toys to play with and, make things with. For me, the biggest part of my library is relationships. So getting to know your administrators, getting to know your support staff throughout the building, getting to know all the teachers, getting to know people in the community, getting to know your students or your patrons or wherever you're working. For me, the biggest part is building those relationships, connecting with people. I highly recommend reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book pretty much changed the way that I operate my library. Seth Godin's Linchpin. I know some librarians love it. Some people hate it. But those things, to me, I think it's all about building relationships. Same thing with building tribes and getting people to surround you and support you. And with a library, if people aren't supporting you and if they don't find value in your library, you could have all the technology in the world and they're happy to cut your job because they have a computer to replace you. They don't need you. So what I've found in my job is over the years and budget cuts and things like that, I've had administrators fight to keep me or fight, against budgets because of me. If somebody else might have been in that position, they might have let it go. So for me, the biggest thing is relationships and finding a balance between technology, but also meeting your clientele, your patrons, your customers, where they're at and what they need. For example, we've added an innovation lab to my library, but we've done it a little bit differently than most libraries. A lot of places kind of want to get rid of everything, throw in a makerspace, and, put a pretty bow on it and call it fancy and tweet about it. I've kind of integrated it into different parts of the curriculum, different parts of the school, because we already have a lot of maker spaces. We have a TV studio, we have an engineering lab, we have a fabulous art wing, architecture classes, wonderful science stuff. So we have all these really cool things going on throughout the high school, and my focus is on highlighting what everybody's doing. We have great fashion classes and cooking, and all of those things are maker classes, even writing a paper in English. So, for example, I brought podcasting into the library as part of our innovation lab, and we had students doing research papers and doing a podcast episode as their paper that they were submitting. So a lot of students found that interesting. We had some different trials and different classes try it out, different projects, whether it was a big research paper, whether it was a smaller kind of project based around a novel that they had read or a genre that they were working with. But basically, I put together notes, I put together a whole packet, helped teachers kind of understand what podcasting was. I got a couple people who are willing to try anything I recommend. I've been there now in my 5th year at the high school. So people come to me and kind of say, what do you got? I need a fresh idea. I need something different. And they trust me to say, hey, what about this? And then they go, okay, let's go with it. Let's see. What do you got? So for me, I've built those trusting relationships. Again, it goes back to the relationship where people trust me and are interested in all of what I have to bring to the table or what's new going on in the library, that they can kind of come in, bring their class, and I can kind of run with it. So with the podcast, it worked out really well. The students really enjoyed it. It was a senior project, so of course, and spring, no less. And they had no interest in writing papers and whatnot. But basically, for me, it was a backdoor way of teaching them how to research, real-world application for research, getting information, using databases, all that kind of great stuff, but putting it into a podcast and coming up with something unique and different. They had their own show titles, their own artwork, their own episodes. We shared it on, a closed circuit website, basically, where they could make it public if they wanted to. Some of the kids really liked it and said that they might continue on. I said, pick things that you're passionate about, pick topics that you're interested in. This doesn't have to be boring, or pick something that relates to the novel as your teacher wants, but, give it your own flair. We had a lot of students got really creative with it, which was surprising because a lot of people don't think students are as creative as they used to be, I guess, but they brought in
and you just
audio
made a great
clips
point about the podcasting.
Funny stuff.
I've been on this podcasting kick lately, where I've had a lot of conversations with people about it. And, even how I explained it with Miles, podcasting isn't just sitting down and recording audio. It's
a lot of work behind the scenes.
It's the research.
That's why my episode hasn't been out.
It's graphic design.
It's a lot of work.
It could be a website. If you listen to NPR podcasts, it's not like two people like you and I sitting down to do a podcast.
Yeah.
It's a team of 50 people who put together these episodes and, all the things that go into it, and the research and the rewrites and the recording and, capturing the audio.
Well, and I look at with the library and projects and things, it's not all about, the old school databases, research books and things like that. And it's not all about the brand new shiny technology and fancy gadgets and gizmos and, putting a stamp on that. It's about a good balance, and it's about understanding the underlying reason of why you're using the technology. Great, we have podcasting microphones, but why? What is the skill? What do we want people to learn? How do I want them to learn it? Great, you can go out and record a podcast in 5 minutes, but is it any use to anybody? So getting students to think a little bit deeper, or why you're going to research, or why you're going to books versus databases. I mean, sometimes teachers come in and they're like, I want them to use books. And it's like, okay, why do we want them to use books? Do we want them to be able to find information in a printed resource? Like, what's the focus? So again, it goes back to relationships, knowing the people you're serving, knowing the focus, knowing the goals, getting to know your administration and what their goals are and what their focus is and where they want to take things so that you kind of can all work together. A lot of times I find that most schools I've been in, after they get to know me for a while, they start throwing a lot of money my way because they know that I look at the library as kind of being the heartbeat of the school. It's a central location. It's a place where things are going on in and out. And for that, I kind of know what's going on. I mean, technology relies on me to find out, well, what are teachers complaining about? What are the issues? What happened? We're a Google school, and, there's different things. Sometimes somebody checks off a different button on the admin dashboard in Google and changes everybody's settings and changes how their computers operate, their Chromebooks and everything. And I bring that back to them and I say, hey, listen, this is what teachers are saying. This is the problem people have, or they'll say to me, hey, we're thinking of doing this. What's your feedback? I try to create that relationship where I meet with our building tech guy on a regular basis, or I meet with an administrator, or I kind of, feel it out and see what's going on. There's different times where I've helped people in things that have nothing to do with the library, but they know they can rely on me as somebody who's going to kind of bring them the information or get them information, in a nice way and just share it.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about the relationships and what you described, and I may have told you this before, but I think as a librarian, you are like part bartender, part psychologist. Like people come to you, they want to talk to you, they want to interact with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And you foster that environment for students and faculty and admin alike.
And I always say to people, even if I don't like you, or I've had an issue with you, or you've not liked me when I first come into school or something I did, I will always help you. Whether or not I like you, I'll help you within the realm of my work. And I've always done that. And a lot of people over time, there's been places I've worked, or even currently, the first year or two, there's people who just always walk by and never say hello, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I think of ways, well, hey, by the way, this is something I thought of how I could help you, or here's an idea, just think about it. And then people start to open up like, oh, I didn't think about that, or that's really cool. Or then they come to me for more information, or basically word spreads and people come to the library. And, I even have students now, Mrs. Nesi, such and such, this teacher told me to come to you and I have no idea, blah, blah, blah. And, whether it's a technology thing, a research thing, or even they know I'm interested in so many different hobbies and passions of my own, kids will come to me and say, always such and such teacher said you would be the person to find out, which is kind of cool.
It definitely is, especially when teachers know that they can send a kid because you're a reliable resource. Now, speaking of resources, something you've done, and I'm pretty sure this is since the last time you were on here, but it deals with people and your catalog. Can you tell people how you've put people into your catalog? And I don't mean biographies, but please share.
Well, I always come up with some unique or different ideas, or come across things that kind of spark a different idea. So in the past, I've actually, in my library, we've had lunch and learn. So previously in other schools, depending on the schedule and how the school works, lunch and learns were something where I did a lunch and learn for staff. So staff would bring their lunch to the library. We'd shut down for the block or the period or half lunch, whatever it was. And they would get free professional development on things that, to me is like the underlying current of the school, what's going on. So we had lunch and learns. In my current role, we don't have that ability with teacher schedules to kind of work it out that way. And we have a massive unit lunch every day, which I kind of enjoy because we get, 100-something kids in and out of the library. So I started doing lunch and learns where staff are the teachers per se about personal passions, personal hobbies. So it's not necessarily, it might be an English teacher who loves fishing, or somebody else who you wouldn't think has a passion for, French cooking or something like that. Or we've had a teacher, they have a rock band, how to start a rock band and how to actually focus on, having a band and not having it fall apart. So we've had a lot of really cool speakers and teachers. So over the time of doing all of those lunch and learns every year and having kind of those passion projects come up, I've decided to try and catalog staff. So things that staff are interested in or having passions about, I've actually put them into my catalog with the topics and subjects that they are passionate about or have a lot of knowledge about. Outside of, hey, so-and-so is a science teacher. Obviously, you can ask them science questions. And with that, it's been kind of fun because people kind of come across, a name every once in a while, like, oh, wow, I found Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so in this search. And I'm like, yeah, they're somebody who's passionate about this or an expert on it, or they've been published in this field, or, they write a blog about it or have an Instagram or YouTube or something.
Now, I know that you yourself are not cataloged, but what are some of the things that you brought in personal passion-wise for your students?
Yeah, if I was cataloged, I'd probably come up in almost all the searches just because I have such a broad...
She's that good and she's not lying.
Well, no, I have a broad interest. I've always been a jack of all trades, master of none. So I've always had a broad interest in every topic and every subject. And I always feel that when students come to me or staff, if it's something I don't know about, I kind of dive deeper and learn about it. So I just kind of become this sponge and soak everything up and learn as much as I can so that I then can give that feedback or information or just kind of put them in the right direction. What I have brought into the library... As much as teachers and students have asked me to do lunch and learns myself, I always say, no, I'm the host. I'm not like the person who should do them, because a lot of times students are like, Miss Nesi, you should teach this. You should teach this. Every month you should do one yourself. And I'm like, no, I'm here to just kind of, organize and create. And I'm not here to be the center of attention. With that, though, we have brought in crocheting. I learned to crochet a couple years ago from another teacher. So we've started doing crocheting at lunch. And we've had students where, they've gone on and crocheted hats for babies in the NICU or, different things, Christmas gifts and whatnot. So we do some events like that where we do crocheting and then word spreads. I've done crocheting, teaching French classes, to try and throw in different things, something different, especially towards the end of the year when everybody's kind of exhausted and teachers are worn out, or even, the holiday time. And so, so we've done that. I'm trying to think. There's a whole bunch of different topics and subject areas. I mean, I've done a lot with cooking. I've gone into different classes and helped out with that in this school. In other schools, I've actually gone in and taught cooking classes for different recipes and things that I've enjoyed and loved. And yeah, I pretty much just kind of walk around and provide everybody with information as much as possible. And if I don't know it, I can direct them to someone or something or a resource where they can find that information. And every week, which I also think helps build relationships, is I send out a weekly EdTech Roundup, which is the top 5 or 7 articles about professional development, education, technology, things that might kind of spark an idea for a teacher. And then in addition to that, which I think is actually the favored part by most staff that read it and request it, I do about 5 to 7 personal development articles. So things that you can do and use in your personal life, some recipes, some things that nobody's really going to come across in a news feed or on Facebook or somewhere else, kind of off the beaten path blogs and stories.
And totally not about education.
Nothing to do with education. So, and a lot of times I've actually found if I miss a week or if I've been out on a Friday, because I only send it on Fridays that I work. I don't send it every single week if I'm not there, or if I'm out or on a trip or something. But when I've missed one, usually I'll get a phone call, the next day or two. And, hey, by the way, I didn't get your EdTech Roundup. Are you still sending them? Please send one out. So it's a lot of fun. People read them or people respond to them. And, little jokes or different things that they find interesting. And a lot of times those personal development articles, or even the professional development ones, especially the EdTech ones, a lot of times as I'm searching for information and finding stuff for other staff members that have come in and asked a question, or students that have asked a question, that's what I kind of throw in there. So it's almost like a little mix from the week, or something that I think some people might need to read or come across that, from the week that they're having, or what's going on around the country or the world or whatever else. So that's one other way I kind of build relationships. I started doing that 12 years ago, and that's been a lot of fun where, I just send it out and nobody really complains, which is great. But I try to send stuff that's always positive, upbeat, different things that I think people are going to find useful. And I've found that a lot of people, as I've left jobs, have actually asked to be on my email list to continue with it, which is kind of fun, where they say, are you still going to send them out in your new job? Could you please make sure you send them to me? So I have, over the years, kind of amassed a couple people over the years and kind of just keep sending it along to whoever is still interested to get the EdTech Roundups. I used to use like S'more and publish them online. And now I just kind of do an email with links. And, I do the text of the title of the article, and then I make that a hyperlink. A lot of people just like to send out a link, but to me, no one's going to click on that. It's kind of spammy. So I kind of do a nice little email, and I might put a little thing at the top about the week or some updates, or put a nice quote, something in there, just so people have, every Friday it's nice. It's Friday. You get a little thing to read for the weekend if you want, or something to take a look at on Monday when you check back in and check your email.
For the librarian who's listening, who's saying, wow, those are some really great ideas, what would be something that you would start with if you were, whether you're, I'm not going to say fresh out of school as a librarian, but say you've just come to a new district? What would be like the first thing you would do to build this trust, build these relationships? What would be your first priority?
Learn everyone's name, which is the first tenet of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you can read that book before school starts, do that if you're going to a new job. That is huge for me. What I found is when you get to know people's names, they love that. Their name is the best word in the English language that they can,
adults
or any
love it,
language.
Kids love it.
Everybody loves when you know their name. So what I used to do is when I talked to somebody, I would, find out their name, and then I'd learn a little something about them, which is kind of how you follow, how to win friends and influence people. And I would find out a few things. And when I first started doing it, I actually kept notes so that I could remember, because I would in a school, sometimes I've worked in schools with 2,500 people. So I would, kind of keep a little spreadsheet like, okay, I just met with so-and-so. Here's a couple little things to remember for next time. And just so I could easily remember. Now I have, my memory works very well in that aspect because I've done it so long. I ask a few things, and then I'm able to connect that with the person. And then the next time I see them, I can easily, I remember their name and I remember something about them, so I can follow up or ask. And people just love that. Think about when somebody remembers your name and somebody remembers something about you, or they ask you about it. You're like, oh my gosh, they love me. That's wonderful. And to me, that's a great way just to kind of break the ice. So I would definitely learn people's names. That's a great way to start building relationships, is just remembering somebody's name, saying hello in the hallway and using their name. So I always try to focus on using names every time I say hello, not just hi, but hi so-and-so, hi so-and-so. So this way you get used to who they are. You don't forget their names. And then you're also able to, kind of build that rapport and make them feel comfortable, because they'll start to remember your name since you're always remembering theirs.
And you just did a great job right there, because my listener so-and-so is now very excited because you said their name a whole bunch of times as you're talking this episode.
Well, try not to use anybody's names with people I work with or things like that.
I know. You don't want to offend the Bills, the Marys, the Bobbies, and the Sues.
True. Or the Jane Doe.
Now, before we finish up, and, as always, thank you for making time out of everything that you do here in the House of EdTech. But before I let you go, what's something, a goal, something you're learning? What is something you're looking forward to doing this year, whether it's professionally or personally, here between August and, say, the end of the next school year, where you're going to learn or grow or do something in your school or, even personally?
Well, I want to explore some different creative projects and see what more I can do with students and research. And, like the podcasting thing went really well, and that kind of grew. All of a sudden, there was like 4 other teachers that came in and were like, hey, I heard you do this podcasting research thing. And I'm like, who told you that? So I'd like to try and come up with some different ways to use the equipment that we have. We have a lot of great stuff that's been on order this summer. So not necessarily podcasting, but just a bunch of different things. We have a Cricut machine that I...
what was that again? What's the machine?
I always called it a cry cut, but I realize it's a Cricut.
It's a Cricut.
I'm sorry, it's a Cricut. I have no idea how to use it. So I'd like to use that this year and get students into kind of creating some things and starting to use that. I played with it a little bit last year, but it didn't come with a whole lot of supplies. So I would like to go to the craft store and just pick up stuff and kind of start to play with it. Just like last year, I spent the whole year kind of really playing with our 3D printer and focusing on that, the podcasting, and some other STEM ideas. But yeah, so I guess I'd love to kind of still, again, come up with something different that kind of blows people away or makes them think differently about the library or the area, their space. We, have done some renovations this summer to the library. My administration has been wonderful support. So, we have some refreshes going on. So I'm looking forward to kind of working with that and updating, the way the space functions and works. So yeah, and I would probably like to try and read a little bit more. I don't read as much fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction. I'm very heavy. I've always been great at reading nonfiction and reading almost everything in the collection, and even biographies and things like that. But fiction, I've actually read a couple fiction books this summer, and I'm just trying to, pick up some of those a little bit more and get into them. I always find it kind of funny once I do pick up a fiction book and I get into it. It's like it flies, within a couple days. I've read the whole book, so it's kind of fun doing that. So I'd like to try and pick that up a little bit more, support some of those different, programs and things like that. I love working with our special needs population. Those students are just phenomenal to me. I love that. They always bring you right back to the moment, living in the present and, being grateful for everything. And they always bring a smile to your face. So I'm going on a bunch of trips with them this year again. And yeah, personally, I would like to learn how to do a pull-up. I've been at CrossFit for 4 months. I definitely need to lose weight and be able to get that all together. But I've definitely made some strides in my fitness and strength and muscle and being solid. But my goal, I think, for the next year would be able to at least do a Kipling pull-up when my shoulder is better, and maybe one day be able to do like a strict pull-up. I don't know.
Neato.
Yeah, I can.
Me too. I can't currently do a pull-up right now either, but I'm getting stronger and better and healthier each time that I go there.
Yeah, and just learning more about my limits and, I don't know, exploring new things, different things.
There are no limits.
There's always something. Well, and you know what? I'm a lifelong learner, hence the podcast. So there's always something that comes up that kind of deters me in a different direction. We learned this summer about scooters, and we're learning about scooter maintenance and all of that kind of stuff. And
yeah, one trip to to Bermuda, we rode scooters, came home, and 2 days later,
wait, go back. I've wanted to get a scooter and a Vespa for many years, and you've always said, no, you don't need one. I take Chris to Bermuda with the kids and he rides a scooter for one day. The next day we come back from Bermuda. Yes, we need to get a scooter. We got to get scooters. And we went out and we got scooters. So I had been saving for quite some time, waiting for the moment that I was going to buy a scooter.
Shout out to Island Scooters in Farmingdale, New Jersey. Not a sponsor, but shout out to them.
So we both bought scooters. So, learning about scooter maintenance, scooter care, all that fun stuff. And, riding scooters. And we've watched videos on just making sure we've got hand signals for when we're both out together, we can kind of communicate. And yeah, so there's always something that comes up, something different. In another week, there'll be another thing. I wish I would record all of these things as they happen. I'd have a lot of podcast episodes. I just can't keep up with all the different things I'm constantly learning and doing.
Whether there's new episodes or not, and there will be new episodes, let people know where they can find your content online.
Sure, the lifelonglearningpodcast.com, as well as katenesi.com. katenesi.com, I write a blog. And there's also links in there for the Lifelong Learning Podcast and how to subscribe and all that fun stuff.
And what's the best way for people who enjoy talking with you and may want to continue a conversation with you? How can they connect with you?
Sure. If you'd like to connect with me, you can always email me at kate@katenesi.com. That's the easiest way to communicate. I am back on Instagram. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. Maybe I think we talked about that in previous podcasts.
We had the great social media debate.
Yes, we did. So, I don't really go on Twitter much. Every once in a while I'll check in there. I'm not really active. But Instagram, I did kind of decide this summer to start over because a lot of the CrossFit people I'm friends with are on Instagram. So it's just a nice way to stay in touch, see if anybody wants to do partner workouts, all that kind of fun stuff. So Kate Nesi on Instagram. I am private, but if you request me, I'll happily let you in. I just don't keep it public because I don't know. I'm strange about public-private stuff.
That's a debate for another day. Thank you, dear. I love you for pushing me to do the podcast. I love you for making this the fifth time. This is the fifth time.
Yeah. Oh, is this the 5-timers club?
You're in the 5-timers club.
Oh, I thought it was like a 7-timers club. Oh, so there you go. Do I get a jacket? Don't they get those fancy jackets?
Yes.
It's like a velour kind of like red
in
smoking
fact,
jacket.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, here, let me take it out of the closet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Let me fit her with the velour jacket.
Wait, but didn't they not let like one of the women not have it because it was like a men's club? Was there like, I feel like somebody was a 5-timers and they were like, you can't be a part of it. It's for men only or something.
I think that, that was a joke last year. I don't remember who the female celebrity was.
I'm starting my own 5-timers club on podcast. So there you go. I'm a 5-timer.
There you go. Who will be next? I don't know. I don't even know. Anyway.
Well, after this, I'll be hosting. So there you go.
There you go. So there you go,
I'll
ladies
take
and
over
gentlemen.
your podcast.
You have more Kate Nesi.
You'll get an episode every 8 months. To.
Actually, while I got you, you know, I had fun. I think it was episode 92. I think that was when we did the end of year episode, we did the live stream. That was a lot of fun a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah, that was fun. Like, people were commenting and stuff. That was my first time doing that.
Yeah. So maybe we'll live stream something together, because live stream has come a long way.
If you love me on the podcast, tell Chris. I don't know how do people email you? I just talk to him, so I don't email him.
They know, at Mr. Nesi on Twitter.
There you go. Well, if you love me on the podcast, tell him, because sometimes he doesn't want to have me on the show.
What? Don't even say that.
Sometimes I'm like, when are you going to have me on the show again? He's like, oh, I can't. I think I upstage you. No,
it is a lot of fun to have you on the show.
It's like Lucy and Ricky. Although usually I'm doing the fun stuff, and I'm like, Lucy, you cannot be on the show.
I love you. Goodbye.
All right, goodbye.
It is always a pleasure to have Kate here on the podcast, and it's really cool that she's a member of the 5-Timers Club. Who will join the club next? I actually have to go back and maybe start re-interviewing and having conversations with people who have been on the show previously. But if I don't figure it out, maybe you could tell me who is the next closest to being a part of the 5-Timers Club here on the House of Ed Tech. Now, before I get to the House of Ed Tech VIP, the last few episodes, I've been able to do the Just Give It a Try segment, which, as you know, if this is, well, actually, maybe you wouldn't know, but if this is the first time you're listening, I'm going to end this episode by telling you that using technology isn't difficult, just give it a try. And the longtime listener knows that that's how I end the episode. And this segment is all about you getting the opportunity to share your story, whether you were successful or you failed. I want to know, and our community wants to know, what you've done in your classroom or school with education technology, or a lesson. Just, I want to hear your story. And this is a part of the episode where I make space for you. So I don't have one today, but if you want to hear these segments and hear these stories, it starts with you. So whether the lesson worked or it went up in flames, go out to chrisnesi.com/flipgrid and click on the Just Give It a Try grid, and your story will be shared in a future episode of the podcast. And now, let's meet this episode's House of Ed Tech VIP. Congratulations to this episode's House of Ed Tech VIP, Rachel Bath from Victoria, Australia. I recently had the opportunity to connect with Rachel and talk about podcasting in her classroom, and she wants to get into creating a podcast for herself, and she's very into education technology, and she basically wants to create an EdTech podcast that doesn't exist in Australia for Australian educators. So it was really cool to have a conversation with her. I did it, a few nights ago, where it was 10 o'clock at night here in New Jersey, and it was 12 noon the next day in Australia for Rachel. It was very cool. And again, she's interested in education technology, innovative learning. She enjoys blogging. She loves Twitter. She loves STEAM, and she loves being connected and learning from other educators around the world. But most importantly, Rachel is a mother of 5 beautiful children who in many cases are her test cases for trialing new tools and ideas. She has her master's in education technology from the University of Southern Queensland, and Rachel's ambition is to provide students with the most innovative learning experiences and engaging curriculum as possible. She also supports her colleagues' explorations of online resources and provides students with authentic learning opportunities that promote engaging learning and skills for the unknown future. You can connect with Rachel via her blog and website, which is rachelbath.wordpress.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. And also connect with Rachel on Twitter. She is at RachBath, and that's RACHBATH. Congratulations, Rachel. Good luck with your podcasting. And, of course, you are a House of Ed Tech VIP. Well, this was a fun episode to create for you. Thanks again to Caitlin for taking time in the evening when normally we would sit down and not do podcasting, but we sat down and had a really fun conversation about her library and the things that she's doing. Of course, make sure you connect with her at Kate Nesi on Twitter, email her kate@katenesi.com, and she's more than happy to have awesome conversations with you. As far as conversations go, let's keep the conversation going. If you enjoyed this episode, go out to chrisnesi.com/138, leave a comment on the show notes, ask a question. You can also find the many ways you can reach out to me on chrisnesi.com/feedback. I would love to connect with you, and if we're not connected, what are you waiting for? Let's do this. Let's be connected. Let's learn from each other and learn together. Now, if you enjoy the House of Ed Tech, hey, you must enjoy it. You're getting to this part of the episode. Do me a huge favor. Tell somebody else about this podcast. The new school year is here, and somebody that you know needs this podcast. So let them know. If you share it on social media, use the hashtag HouseOfEdTech. It's also on Instagram. It's also on Twitter. So hashtag HouseOfEdTech @HouseOfEdTech. That will let me know that you're sharing it. So let us mobilize House of Ed Tech community. The other thing you can do is you could consider becoming an awesome supporter of the podcast. My awesome supporter program is powered by patreon.com, and that lets a listener like you support a podcaster and content creator like me. Without them, the show really wouldn't be as good as it is. Special thanks to Anthony Arnaud from the New Teacher Podcast, Eric Kurtz from the Control-Alt-Achieve Podcast, Dan Gallagher, Carlos Garza, Mr. G. Carlos Garza is Mr. G because I didn't really say that right. Thank you to Peggy George, Jen Giffen, Jeff Herb, Mike Messner, JP Prezavento, Lynn Smargis, Scott Titmus, and Kyle Wilcox. Thank you, everybody, for all your support. And if you are interested in becoming an awesome supporter of the podcast, go out to chrisnesi.com/awesome. The next episode of the House of Ed Tech is going to be episode 139, and that is going to come to your ears on September 1st, 2019. My goodness, summer has flown by. So September 1st will be here in a couple weeks. If you started school, enjoy these first 2 weeks, build that culture and community with your students and your colleagues, and I'm looking forward to doing it starting on September 3rd, which I'm pretty sure is a Tuesday because Rutgers starts, high school starts, so it's going to be awesome. Until next time, thanks for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try.